With the Elimination Chamber 2026 event being officially concluded, we have a lot here to get into. We certainly have, a clear definition now as far as what the matches for WrestleMania are, as far as the Elimination Chamber winners are concerned. Now we have Randy Orton as the men's Elimination Chamber winner and Rhea Ripley as the women's Elimination Chamber winner. I feel like overall, this show, this PLE pay-per-view, whatever you want to call it, I feel like it was very predictable in the sense of I'm pretty sure everybody watching this event could have predicted the outcomes of these matches and who was going to win. Even certain surprises and certain things that we saw on the show, I feel like they were very predictable. Again, predictable sometimes isn't necessarily bad, but sometimes it's just necessarily just underwhelming, and I feel like that's kind of what we had here tonight. This show for me was kind of in the middle. It definitely feels like it's sandwiched in the middle between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, and this road to WrestleMania definitely, like I said before, has not lived up to par as far as other previous years are concerned, as far as the build up and whatnot. But again, we're barely crossing the chamber, so I hope that after this we at the very least get some sort of hype going into Mania, because right now there's currently none. Before I mention anything that I'm going to mention, though, we had announced that the United Center here in Chicago, Illinois was completely sold out at either 18,000 or 19,000 people. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's true per se, because there's been a lot of news regarding this event not being necessarily the greatest selling event. They had trouble selling tickets for this event. They're having trouble selling tickets for WrestleMania. It's a very costly endeavor to go to these WWE shows. So 18,000, 19,000, I don't know if that's exactly completely accurate. I don't know if that's completely accurate. Then again, there may be 18,000 people, but how many of those 18,000 people in that arena actually paid for their tickets? How many of those were comped? It's very tricky with WWE, because they'll tout that they're sold out, but in reality, it's very slippery slope when it comes to all that sort of stuff. So, but regardless, we kicked off the show here tonight with the women's Elimination Chamber match. This match really came down to two people here. It was either between Rhea Ripley or Tiffany Stratton. There was dark horses in that match, such as Alexa Bliss. I feel like the main sort of MVPs of this match were Kiana James and Raquel Rodriguez. So much so that when Raquel got eliminated, the crowd, visibly started booing, because they wanted to see her, at the very least, go a little bit further in this chamber match. But eventually, when it came down to Rhea and Tiffany, you kind of figured it was going to go either or. I figured if they went Tiffany, it would be a very predictable and very boring route, because we've already seen Tiffany and Jade, and it really wasn't all that great from what I remember. So running that back at WrestleMania, it's like, why would you do that? Rhea, she lost the tag team titles last night, so it did make sense for her to win here tonight. So she got the win here. She got the win over Tiffany Stratton. And, based off of what we have, the current possible outcomes, it was either this or Tiffany against Jade. And I would rather much prefer this, because this screams more WrestleMania than Tiffany and Jade does. Again, this doesn't really feel like this was the original plan, because it certainly feels like the original plan was going to be Bianca and Jade. And if not Bianca and Jade, then maybe Charlotte and Jade. But if you have those options ruled out, the next best option is going to be Rhea Ripley. The only question I have is, where does this leave Io Sky, and what does Io Sky do at WrestleMania? Again, you can mention a lot of things as far as maybe Rhea is being a little bit over pushed. Again, I'm not going to get into that here, because it's the best of both options here that we have between Tiffany and Rhea. Next, we had AJ Lee against Becky Lynch for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. This was AJ Lee's first official singles match in, I think, about a decade or so. They mentioned something on commentary here as far as this was her first singles match in a long time. There was some tensions here between the referee Jessica Carr and Becky Lynch. Obviously, there's a lot of tensions there between both of them. AJ Lee had Becky Lynch in the submission hold, her Black Widow, and Becky tapped out. However, the referee was down, so she didn't see this. The turnbuckle was exposed, and Becky Lynch attempted to hit AJ Lee into the turnbuckle, but the referee told Becky Lynch that she couldn't do it. She would disqualify her or something along those lines. But then AJ Lee did it, and there was nothing there for as far as disqualification, and then AJ made Becky tap out. So AJ Lee predictably won the Women's Intercontinental Championship here. This was a fairly decent match between both women. I was certainly not expecting something very good because, we've seen their promos. Those haven't been really great. So going into this match, I wasn't expecting all that much. I figured either we get one or two options. We either get AJ and Becky in a rematch once again at WrestleMania, and that's where Becky wins back her Intercontinental Championship because she has a lot of gripes as far as the referee wasn't really on her side. The referee screwed her, so to speak, continuing that whole gimmick. Or maybe we get possibly Becky Lynch against the referee Jessica Carr at WrestleMania because, again, they've sort of, teased tensions between both of them. I don't know if that's what they're going to do necessarily at WrestleMania, but those are two options that we currently have. And speaking of AJ Lee, we moved on to her husband, CM Punk, against Finn Balor for the World Heavyweight Championship. Against CM Punk, got a really good pop here in Chicago, being a Chicago native. This match was really good. It might be a tad bit better than their match that they had on Raw a few weeks ago. Again, predictably though, CM Punk got the win. In my opinion, the finish here was kind of flat. Like, it kind of just came out of nowhere. CM Punk just hit a GTS on Balor, and that was it. And afterwards, Balor and Punk shake hands, and Balor goes off to the back, and AJ comes out to celebrate with CM Punk. And that was kind of it. I was expecting at the very least some Judgment Day stuff here. Maybe Dom gets in the way. Maybe JD comes out. Something along those lines to have you at the very least, a hook, so to speak, for Monday night. But we got nothing. So I hope on Monday night we get something between the Judgment Day and Finn. Then we moved on to the Men's Elimination Chamber match. One thing I will say about this really quick was the entrances for the Men's Elimination Chamber match went on for way too damn long. Like, Javon Evans was coming out there, and I literally told myself, I said, we've been doing entrances for 15 minutes now, man. Because they have this weird tendency of going out and making their entrances and going out around every single pod and sort of having a little taunt, a little moment, and then the match never officially starts until everybody's in there. So we literally had about 15-20 minutes of entrances, which was one of the worst things here that I don't really like as far as the chamber matches. But as far as this match goes, I felt like this match was a fairly decent match. Logan Paul was definitely playing the heel of this match, if you couldn't tell. Though very predictable as far as what we mentioned last night with the Masked Man. The Masked Man came out here and attempted to screw Logan Paul, but he was thwarted by the security at ringside. Adam Pearce unmasked him, and again, it just turned out to be nobody. Although, all the security left with the Masked Man, leaving a perfect opportunity for another Masked Man to appear and stomp Logan Paul and give Cody Rhodes the opportunity to eliminate Logan Paul. And he unmasked himself to reveal none other than Seth Rollins, because everybody kind of saw it coming that it was going to be Seth Rollins unveiling himself as the true Masked Man. All these Masked Man copycats were probably the work of Seth Rollins. So now Seth Rollins is officially back in time for WrestleMania. And I have to ask the question, what is the match for Seth Rollins at WrestleMania? Because I think originally it was going to be Braun Breaker, but Braun got injured, and then Bronson got injured. So now it's just Logan Paul and Austin Theory. And if you run Seth against Logan Paul at WrestleMania, again, that's going to be a rematch from 39. And I don't really know if that is the best play here. Again, you could, have somebody like Logan Paul and Austin Theory against Seth Rollins and Bad Bunny, if they could, pull Bad Bunny into WrestleMania, or maybe pull somebody like LA Knight to team with Seth against the Visions, Austin Theory and Logan Paul, because I'm kind of wondering where Seth goes from this, right? So that left us down to Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton, as kind of we all figured was going to happen. They've been teasing the whole thing of whether or not, Cody and Randy, they're going to come down to the final two. And it seems like they're going to eventually square off when Drew McIntyre hits Cody Rhodes with the championship belt over the back of his head. He attempts to Claymore him. Randy Orton gets in there, RKO's Drew, Cody Rhodes, Crossroads, Drew, and Randy Orton pulls the trigger, RKO's Cody. 1, 2, 3. Randy Orton is going to WrestleMania. On paper, it's a face Drew McIntyre in a singles one-on-one match. Afterwards, there's this sort of, kind of moment here between Randy and Cody where Randy is just staring at a fallen Cody, kind of regretting, but also not regretting what he just did, because they've been running the story of whether or not Randy Orton is, man enough to pull the trigger against his buddy Cody Rhodes. Again, Randy has no problem with pulling the trigger, and Cody sometimes does. But again, I have always figured that the match going into WrestleMania is still going to result in being a fatal four-way. We get Fatu in there, we get Cody in there, because Cody now has a gripe that Drew McIntyre screwed him out of the Elimination Chamber win. Fatu still has the gripe that Drew McIntyre screwed him out of the Elimination Chamber qualifier. So there's definitely a lot of gripes for a lot of people to be in this match at WrestleMania, which kind of defeats the purpose of the Elimination Chamber match. Oh, and one thing before we end off the night here, we had the reveal of the mystery crate. This was probably the most atrocious thing on this show, and with good reason, because a lot of people, I'm not saying they got their hopes up, but a lot of people were figuring that this was going to be something at the very least newsworthy, and it really turned out to be nothing. So we get the unveil of the mystery box crate, and it turns out to be Danhausen. Now, I'm not going to pretend here and act like I know exactly who Danhausen is. I know that he is buddies with Punk. I know that he used to wrestle in AEW, and that's about it. And as soon as he came out here, first of all, he came out here in kind of a performance type thing here, performance type entrance. And after his entrance was done and the whole arena went to blackout, you can visibly hear the Chicago crowd boo the fuck out of this segment. Because number one, it's a cringy ass segment to do. Genuinely, like, it's cringy. And number two, because they expected something else. They expected, I'm not even going to say Chris Jericho, but at the very least something like Chris Jericho, something bigger. I think they would have even taken Triple H coming out here and claiming it's a new era, because I don't even know how many people in the crowd were genuinely, happy to see Danhausen or even knew who the guy was. But that was something that was definitely a thing on this show. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of tonight's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Your thoughts as far as the winners, as far as everything that we saw here on tonight's show. Post your comments down below, and until next time, I will see all of you on the next one.